The government has just over a week left to evacuate thousands of American citizens and U.S. allies from Afghanistan by the August 31st deadline. President Biden met with members of his national security team at the White House Monday. CBS's Skylar Henry has the details.
Thousands of Americans remained trapped in Kabul, and Monday the Pentagon confirmed the military is making limited trips into the city to transport citizens back to the airport to be evacuated.
We are going out as needed and helping Americans get into the field.
The U.S. and its allies evacuated more than 16,000 refugees in the last 24 hours, headed to overcrowded processing centers in the Middle East. The government called in private airlines to help move the evacuees onto new centers around Europe.
We are running biometric and biographic background checks on Afghan evacuees before bringing them to the United States.
Refugee flights have already begun landing at Dulles Airport outside of Washington, D.C. President Biden tweeted, "We will welcome Afghans who helped us in the war effort to their new home in the United States of America, because that's who we are. That's what America is." President Biden says he may need to extend next week's withdrawal deadline to make sure everyone is evacuated. But the Taliban says it isn't agreeing to any extension.
Ultimately, it will be the president's decision how this proceeds, no one else's.
The administration says there is a growing threat of terrorist attacks on the airport in Kabul, and there was a gunfight overnight involving U.S. forces.
No U.S. casualties or partner force or coalition forces were involved, but regrettably, an Afghan security force member lost his life.
President Biden will discuss the situation in Afghanistan with allies during a virtual G7 meeting Tuesday. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
For more on this, I want to bring in the Wall Street Journal's national security correspondent, Nancy Youssef. Hi there, Nancy. So can you start by giving us an update on the evacuation efforts and how they're helping Americans stranded outside of Kabul's airport?
Sure. You made some reference to it in the piece leading up to this about the U.S. Saying today that they are now moving outside of the airport at times to get Americans into the airport compound. It can sometimes be a few hundred yards, but it's a critical space that they have to get through to get into the airport, and we heard today that the U.S. is doing that. They also said at the White House and at the Pentagon today that they'd evacuated the highest number of people out of Kabul in the last 24-hour period, 11,000 on U.S. military aircraft. But there are thousands that remain both around the airport and around Afghanistan. And we also heard that the U.S. is still not sure how many Americans remain or how they plan to reduce those numbers in time of that August 31st deadline.
And Nancy, you talk about that critical space just outside the airport. Officials said at least one person died and several others were wounded during a shooting incident at Kabul's airport Monday. What more can you tell us about that?
That's right. This is an area where there are lots of crowds gathered. There are a limited number of Afghan security forces who remain, and the report from U.S. Central Command, which is responsible for military operations in Afghanistan, was that an hostile actor that they couldn't identify as Taliban started firing. U.S. and German soldiers returned fire, and that led to an Afghan death of one of those soldiers. And so we haven't gotten any clarity on what the exchange was or whether this Afghan soldier was killed by friendly fire. And so there are a lot of unknown details, but it really underscored how volatile the environment is around just outside that gate, and the inability to really identify who's Taliban, who's a threat for other reasons, and figure out how to create a security situation such that not only that civilians can get through, but that security forces can operate in a way that allows for them to know how to protect themselves and how to engage with those crowds in a safe way. I think the situation today really got at how quickly things can change in such a tense, stressful environment.
And Nancy, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked about the potential for evacuations to extend past the August deadline. He said the administration believes it can get all Americans out in time. Let's listen to that.
The president believes we are making substantial progress. Dozens of flights, thousands, now tens of thousands of people evacuated from the country. We believe today will be an efficient and effective day, and tomorrow and the next day as well. And as I said, he is taking this day by day and will make his determinations as we go.
He said they are consulting with the Taliban on every aspect. Tell us more about what the Taliban is saying and how this could actually play out.
Yeah, there were a lot of important developments on that today. We heard from the president over the weekend that there are discussions about moving past that August 31st deadline. I should note that that deadline was one created by the United States and now being held to by the Taliban, which is saying you must be out by then. Since then, the Taliban has communicated with the United States that it needs to be out by that date, and that if it doesn't happen, that they risk the security cooperation that is happening around that airport between the U.S. and the Taliban collapsing. At the same time, we heard from U.S. allies like France and Germany and the United Kingdom that they didn't think they could get all their personnel and the Afghans who supported them out by August 31st. So what we saw today was growing pressure on the Biden administration to move past that deadline and some of the risks that come with it, not only from the Taliban, but again, other groups like the Islamic State and al-Qaeda elements threatening U.S. forces. With every day that the U.S. is there, the U.S. military says there are increased risks to their troops, and those risks will only increase as we get closer to the first, because one of the things U.S. will have to do is get the 5,800 troops out. That'll take a number of days, and as force is smaller, then that there's less security and growing risks for the U.S. military. So what we really saw today is a real challenge coming up against the Biden administration. On one hand, they have said that they can rescue everybody out who needs to get out or wants to get out, but at the same time, they're going up against numbers that suggest it'll be very challenging, and they have both allies and the Taliban putting pressure on them to either extend or meet that deadline.
Nancy, you mentioned the threat to American troops. More broadly, CBS News polling shows that 60% of Americans are now concerned that there is a greater threat of terrorism in the U.S. in the wake of this Taliban takeover. What does that threat landscape look like now? Is it still emerging at this point?
I think it is. I think one of the shocks for a lot of people in Washington, and I imagine for a lot of Americans, was how quickly the Taliban was able to take control of the country. It really picked up its campaign in mid-June, and in about 8 days took 34 provincial capitals across the country. But at the same time, the Taliban that is entering Afghanistan arguably is not strong enough to fill the power vacuum that has been left with the absence of the Afghan government. And I think there are fear that other terror groups will come in and start to fill that vacuum as well. Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, perhaps terror groups we haven't even heard of yet. And so the concern becomes, do we see over a period of weeks or months or years terror groups finding safe haven in Afghanistan, the ability to operate, and can from there plot attacks against the United States and its allies? So it's all quite unknown because events are moving so quickly, but I think what people are seeing is an environment that is really ripe for not only the Taliban but other terror groups to enter Afghanistan and operate safely, potentially to plot attacks against the United States and its allies.
And finally, Nancy, does the administration have a record of all of the U.S. military weapons and equipment left behind in Afghanistan that could potentially fall into Taliban or other extremist groups' hands?
It's a great question, and the short answer is no. And I have to stress it's actually a breathtaking amount of weapons and equipment that is now under Taliban control. Remember that the U.S. was dependent on the Afghan National Security Forces that they had trained to protect Afghanistan and stop this Taliban advance. And because of that, they've left all sorts of planes, guns, technical equipment used to, for example, see things at night or ammunition. And every time a provincial capital fell or a base fell to the Taliban, they acquired all those weapons. And so there's real no way to account for it because it's so large in scale. And more troubling is what will the Taliban do with that equipment? Some would argue that they're better equipped than many nations in terms of the amount of equipment they've acquired through their takeover in Afghanistan. And so How do they deploy it? How do they use it? Whose hands does it fall under? And what can the U.S. do, since there's no clear way for them to reclaim that equipment? We're talking about billions and billions of dollars worth of equipment that largely can't be accounted for.
Really troubling questions raised by that. Nancy Youssef at the Pentagon. Nancy, thank you very much.
Thank you.